This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. Now, here's your host, Kevin Pruitt.
This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast. My name is Kevin Pruitt, and it's a pleasure and honor to interview another great guest today. He was the first salesperson at Facebook Audience Network who helped grow the business to $3 billion. He then went to Unity to help strengthen their ad business ahead of their IPO. He founded Classify to solve privacy, safe contextual targeting, and content classification. And I know there is much, much more. So please join me in welcoming Brendan Norman to the Marketing Umbrella Podcast. Brendan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
We have already had a really great chat before we hit the big red record button, but it's so hard to encapsulate, a life of experiences in a paragraph. So round it out a little bit. What are some other things that we didn't mention that might give the audience a really good idea who Brendan Norman is?
Oh man, that is really difficult. It's kind of like when you're interviewing a candidate for a role, you only get 30 minutes to kind of validate all these things, and it's like it's virtually impossible to do it so quickly. If I had to reduce it down, to a very basic level, I've always been somebody who was just deeply curious in how things work. And when I chat with my parents about what was I like as a kid, they're like, you would take everything apart. Like you'd go find an electronics thing or Legos, whatever it was, find something and take it apart and try to put it back together in some better way. Especially things that were broken or didn't work. And I find that I still do that all the time around the house. If something like my water heater went out recently, and it's like not that old of a water heater. So thankfully to something like YouTube, was able to quickly go, oh, maybe the thermopiler, thing is out. So took that whole thing apart, figured out there was a little bit of corrosion on one of the elements and was able to put it back together, take the corrosion off and put it back in, and then it worked. But yeah, that kind of applies to, I'd say, most of life. Like I deeply love to analyze like technological problems, but also human things, right? I'm constantly also figuring out what's going on in my own brain and like who I am, and I'm, even at this stage in life, still discovering things about why I am the way I am, like what patterns I have in relationships or with people romantically, work-wise, and also just deeply analytical of those things too, through the lens of always trying to get the best outcome and like, be the best version of me so that I can be the best version of me for other people and support my team and support our clients better. But yeah, analytical, love to take things apart, love to analyze and discuss and explore, and I'm just curious about how things work.
It's really interesting. You and I chatted a little bit about your first name, Brendan, and how there was a famous Irish Celtic saint in the 5th century, that supposedly took a journey from Ireland to the New World, and just the whole idea, how many parallels there are in his life and even your own. But I just love just kind of the juxtaposition of those two things, and the journey of exploration that he and the small band of monks supposedly took, versus the entrepreneurial experience. So was there anything early in life, like when you said your mom gave you a Saint Brendan, pendant to wear, but was there anything, maybe even from his life that was kind of an inspiration to you, as your namesake?
And, it's really crazy, and I'll be eternally grateful for you for even asking that question, because I think until, 10 minutes ago, I hadn't connected those dots in my head. I just read books about him, and kind of understood who he was, but I'd never actually drawn any parallels to my own life. And so thank you for even asking that question. I guess just in terms of being a founder, I mean, there are a lot of parallels to figuring out, how to chart your course into, what's the word, uncharted waters, or how to,
for sure,
see a direction, want to go explore something, realize that we don't know what's beyond the horizon. Like maybe there's great stuff, maybe there's nothing. maybe there's danger, maybe there's riches. For him, as a monk, I'm sure it was a lot more religious focused in terms of understanding how he could help, through his own lens, help
Mm.
folks that didn't understand his own religion, how he could help evangelize, that, and through his perspective, help save them or whatever, he was attempting to accomplish as a monk. But there are a lot of parallels. And, I also relayed this story earlier, but have a very good friend and advisor investor who reminded me recently that he thinks that all founders are a little crazy and definitely a little insane.
Have to be. I think it's a requirement. I mean, it's the roller coaster of life, and there's I mean, really have no idea what the not only tomorrow, but even what the rest of today, will bring you in that journey. But let's talk really about Classify. The what you've created there. Give us the kind of the foundational, what's the why behind it, and why was it created?
When I worked at Facebook, I got to work on ads products and help to build with some of the smartest people in the industry. And now a lot of those people have gone on to do really cool stuff, whether it's to work in government or, work in the LLM space. Just some of the smartest people that I've ever gotten the privilege to work with. And early on, before things like GDPR or CCPA
Hmm.
or a lot of these privacy regulation, before Cambridge Analytica even, I joined in 2014 when we kind of had the wild west of like, do whatever you want to with data collection. And it was really for the best, that regulators stepped in and said, maybe there should be a lot more control and
Mm.
transparency over how this stuff is tracked. And I think that that's really important, and it's really important to continue to just go down that path of understanding, giving consumers the ability to control the destiny of their own data. But I also deeply believe in the value exchange of seeing an ad is a great value exchange for getting a free product or service
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think that folks don't discuss enough. But you asked about the genesis for Classify. I was actually building a totally separate platform, taking the entrepreneurial journey. Now I moved to Lake Tahoe in 2020 and was building this platform to help connect backcountry ski guides to folks who love backcountry ski touring and then eventually other adventure sports. And it's a very niche market. I built the platform. I started to bring on some guides. I started to bring on some folks who were interested in connecting with these guides, and then tried to market the platform and couldn't find any ad tech companies who were helpful in finding the right content. Everybody wanted to bucket it into a high level category like winter sports or skiing,
Hmm.
but that includes resort skiing, that includes a whole bunch of other
Hmm.
areas that
Yeah.
they're not as specific. And that kind of led me down the path of asking why it didn't exist, that we had the ability to really get granular in terms of finding that very specific types of content. And the answer was technologies didn't exist. And the industry had been heavily reliant on identity-based audience targeting. So
Hmm.
it knows you, Kevin, and it kind of knows your, what you've looked at around the internet. And then they've taken a lot of other interesting data, purchase data, it's a lot of probabilistic stuff in terms of what you might be interested in. But one of the things that I got to see work really well at Facebook was knowing, content adjacency or like contextual targeting and alignment around when you're reading an article about backcountry ski touring, you're much more likely to buy that pair of, Black Crow's Camex Freebird
Yeah.
backcountry skis
Yeah.
because you're thinking about that thing. You're much more
Right.
likely to engage with an ad that's relevant to the content that you're reading. And, I got kind of passionate about solving that because it just didn't exist. And thankfully was able to connect with one, an old client of mine we worked with when I was at Facebook, and then, two other guys who were introduced to me by advisors. Built this relationship, and they all had very similar stories and convictions around like, man, this doesn't exist. This would be really cool if it did, because it would help, advertisers run their ad against the best content.
Mm.
It would help reduce that supply chain, and it would help create better sustainability. It increases advertiser value, and we kind of sat down, the four of us, and built this, using some modern machine learning and some modern AI that we built on our own. We figured out a much better way to classify content, look at some really interesting attributes of that content specifically, understand it semantically, contextually, and build on all the real tools of how a human would read, a full article, and realize that there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of different themes that are inside of that article. It's not just reduced to a category or like one or two keywords. And then thanks to modern, embeddings and modern vector databases, we were able to do that at scale across the whole web and kind of organize the internet into a way that makes it very searchable so that you can build these custom contextualized curated lists, not just at a top level domain, CNN.com or subdomain CNN.com/sports, but, CNN.com/sports/ backcountry ski touring, Cody
Right.
Townsend's 50 project.
Right.
So we sat down and built that. We launched it in June. And so far it's been going really well because agencies find a lot of value in just knowing that their ad is showing up against the right piece of content.
I mean, it's such a, to a layperson like myself, I mean, it's like, you kind of solved the pre-qualified lead, because they've pre-qualified themselves because they are actively searching for content that is right in your sweet spot, that, and you've identified that because, that's who we want to talk to. We want to talk to the person that is already searching for, that specific content. What's the tie-in like what does the back end look like that says, okay, how, so you can identify what Kevin is looking at on the internet, if he's doing searches for, particular, products or, places to do backcountry skiing or whatever. But what's the mechanics of that look like, through Classify?
There's definitely a bit of secret sauce.
Yeah, you don't
In terms
don't
of
divulge the all the spices that you put in the chicken here.
in terms of that, but at the high level, I mean, I actually grew up in Kentucky, so that's a very appropriate KFC, whatever, 21 herbs and spices. Um, Another appropriate analogy, at the end of the day, like knowing what attributes to collect when you're classifying a piece of content and knowing how to organize those things, through a model that makes it really easily searchable, and then putting that in a database that you're able to very quickly and efficiently search is really important. And it's been really cool to see on the user application side, folks are coming to tryclassify.com, and in addition to just building a contextual segment, a list of URLs that, is relevant to the campaign that they want to run, they're also using it for search, and they're also using the
Mhm.
lookalike modeling, to find, I've got a website, I've got a medical journal, I've got some website that I'm reading that's interesting, I'm learning about this thing. Go find me the next, 100 most similar websites
Mm.
based on the content, not just based on who the author or based on, what Google thinks it might want to surface, but really just based on the content itself. And we're really good at doing that.
Yeah, that's next level. It's interesting. And like I've done a number of these, marketing episodes and podcast interviews, and so often the product that is born out of this journey, that turns into a company, was because they were scratching their own itch.
Yeah.
And it sounds like exactly your story. You're like, hey, I was looking for this and it didn't exist, to the level that I needed it to exist. So I had to build it, and had to go out there. But is there, like, what are some of the obstacles that maybe you ran into early that, I mean, it's one thing to have this concept on a whiteboard that says this is where we want to end up.
Yeah.
But then, we put some things in place. We, kind of do what does our MVP look like, and is it working? But what were some of the hurdles that you hit really early on that you had to kind of solve for?
It's an evolution, and we will just constantly be asking that exact same question, and we'll constantly be running into more and more and more hurdles, I think, as we continue growing. But early on, figuring out and solving how do we do this in a way that, like, it would be really easy just to build something on top of ChatGPT, and it would
Mm.
be really easy to use AWS and these very expensive systems. You could go out and do that tomorrow, or later tonight, or you could, do it this afternoon. we decided to take the approach of building something from the ground up that was, lean, much more cost effective. When we think about, charging for this, it's a premium product, but if we built it on top of existing products that were very expensive, we would have priced ourselves out. So we
Yeah.
sat down and we said, how do we design a system that's like very fast, very lightweight, but also very accurate? And a lot of that just takes time to figure out, all the back end kind of machine learning elements to how do you classify a piece of data, and then how do you make sure it's easily searchable. The other side, that's the back end side. And then the other side is the client side, which is arguably, the most important piece of like, if you, Kevin, are sitting there going back and forth between a whole bunch of different platforms to try to build a marketing campaign, how do we simplify that for you and make it really easy for you to just use? And I don't think we're related, but Don Norman wrote The Design of Everyday Things about, design. And it talks about the Norman door, which again, I don't know if we have any connection, but it's basically talking about how, some doors are engineered and you can't figure out if you're supposed to push or pull it. And that's a terrible design if you don't just intuitively know. And, previous technologists that were building, software applications or hardware applications would build something for themselves and then say, people will figure out how to use it. And, brilliant folks like Steve Jobs came along and built really thoughtful user interfaces that are just intuitive. And they took the opposite approach of like, the onus should be on us to listen to our clients, to make sure that if you're using, whatever product you're using of ours, it should be elegant, it should be thoughtful, and it should just be very intuitive. And I shouldn't have to train you how to use the thing. So long-winded way of getting back to the original question of saying, one of the cool things that we introduced recently that I was really proud of our team, and over the course of hundreds of customer interviews and feedback, that we just got from listening to folks, was that fragmentation and how difficult it is to go, basically build a marketing campaign using a DSP connected to an SSP and a deal ID and like all these different tools. Everybody's now using ChatGPT, and natural language prompting, is kind of the future in how we interact with the web and how we interact with a lot of tools. So we also built a similar feature, that anybody can come to right now, tryclassify.com, and, pop in a prompt, build their campaign, and then see what list of URLs that we would target. And that was the thing, I think, that listening to customers about helping solve the pain point of making it really easy to use. And then the next iteration of that is MCP. So it's being able to deploy that agent and being able to deploy that prompt-based type of interaction anywhere you want and customize it, deploy it inside of your own environment, build something new entirely. But a big part of, I think, our DNA as a company is to just be really thoughtful about who's going to be using this product and how do we just continue to make it really valuable, but also save you time and make it easy to use.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I can see as you're talking about that, you can, your mind is spinning that says, hey, I just remembered that thing we discovered, 6 months ago that was a kind of that light bulb, that aha moment, that was the game changer for you. Have the platforms pushed back in any way on what you're trying to build?
We haven't had any pushback. Some folks have replicated, which is in some ways flattering, because anybody that does replicate something that you build, whether you've been in an early conversation and shared a prototype of something and then they're like, oh, we're not going to talk to you for a while, and then all of a sudden you see it pop up on their system, that happens. That's a risk.
Yeah.
And that's kind of flattering in terms of, you were building something in the right direction. And I think that, ad tech and marketing are not zero-sum games, even though there are very dominant players that, have figured out supply chain and like vertical integration, and they figured out a lot of efficiencies of how to have more and more pieces to the puzzle. Like, it's never going to be a zero-sum game.
Right.
And I don't know, I guess back to that question, nobody's pushed back. There's a lot of folks who are in various stages of doing integration, and a lot of folks, I think the larger players too, realize that having more of a marketplace approach as opposed to a, kind of a walled garden approach
Hmm.
gives consumers more optionality, and it allows for, a thriving ecosystem. I'm always, as a small startup now, I'm always in favor of platforms that encourage that level of innovation and
Yeah.
kind of competition, because then the onus is on each of the platforms to deliver value. And, that's kind of authentic to the American experience of capitalism to begin
Hmm.
with, is like, you built the big platform, now you give a marketplace the ability, to have the best tools and the best folks who are able to evangelize that, to get that out. And, hopefully it's never just about one person taking all the market share,
Yeah.
but love the idea of giving clients more access to different tools based on their specific applications and needs.
I mean, it really is kind of almost the whole open source, mentality that just says, hey, we want to provide kind of the platform itself and have everybody build on that. But it is it is really interesting to me the way you're describing this. So I'm trying to picture in my mind. So you've got, you're identifying the content out there that is probably the most applicable, to what you're trying to reach. But what's the actual connection? So there's the first step may be identifying, but then how do you take that next step and say, okay, now I'm going to identify, say, my ad, directly, or I'm going to connect it directly to the content. So you see the ad when you're seeing the content or whatever. Walk us through that without, once again, without divulging too much here, but what's the
Yeah.
connection point there?
Um, the whole ecosystem is very complex, and like today, Classify sits in the space where I say we are a data provider that provides the ability to target those ads, but we don't provide the bidding or the ad serving or some of the additional pieces. Eventually, like, who knows where the advertising and marketing landscape will net out,
Hmm.
in a year, 2 years, or 5 years. But today we provide basically the visibility and kind of the roadmap for when you're bidding, and typically most advertisers are using a bidding strategy. So while we're informing and we're curating a list of URLs, at the page level to run ads against, we don't have the full stack end to end to be able to
Hmm.
ensure that they're delivering against those ads, those pieces of content specifically.
Maybe the key word there is yet. You don't have it yet.
We don't have it yet, yeah. And it is a complex system. And there's a great new book right now. Ari Paparo wrote Yield, and it's really relevant to the Google lawsuits that PubMatic just announced a new lawsuit against Google. And also we know that the big antitrust, against Google. And I'll say that, when you read this book, like, you realize that there was a lot of very thoughtfulness that went into the strategy, Google strategy specifically, about how to build, one of the most sophisticated, and they did build a monopoly at the end of the day, for sure. And they did a lot
Hmm.
of
Yep.
anti competitive practices that were not great. Absolutely. And also at the same time, I mean, they were incredibly thoughtful and strategic in how they built, this full end-to-end solution. Now, when they did that, and then they started advantaging their own
Hmm.
side, like, that's where we get into some really shady stuff that's
Yeah.
like not good. But even at Facebook, we studied their strategy a lot from the outside perspective, as much as we could, and tried to deeply understand what they did well. And there were a lot of things that obviously they did build this, the largest ad platform ever created in the history and the most sophisticated one. Theirs was fairly fragmented, and there are a lot of disparate pieces that didn't work super well together. And at the end of the day, having something that's that big or monopolistic isn't great for the rest of the
Hmm.
industry. So my
Yep.
hope is that moving forward, there will be more space for lots of different players that are able to help see these different inefficiencies, and then, help clients find the right value in exploiting some of the inefficiencies. But yeah, anyway, it's a fragmented space. So, like, we sit in this one niche space today.
How close are you to the original whiteboard? You know, you said you were, I don't know if we did it while we were recording or before we turned the record button on, but you said, you know, hey, we got four guys sitting around a, you know, kind of a conference room, just kind of brainstorming here. And I can imagine what that, you know, whiteboards, you know, might have looked like. But how close are you to the original vision that you had?
We're pretty darn close, which is really cool. And I'll say that it's kind of like, back to St. Brendan who got out there and he was like, cool, that horizon, there's probably some stuff over there. Maybe I've heard some rumors that there might be some
Yeah.
interesting people or things in that direction. We're gonna build this boat and we'll probably have to like change that boat as we're going. We're probably gonna have to fix it, repair it, modify it, improve it, make it better. But when they originally sat down and mapped out what that would look like, it's cool that it's a better version of the original whiteboard, but in a lot of ways, it's very similar. And the general direction of travel of, our guiding vision of saying, how do we help an advertiser find the right content to put an ad against that creates value by helping, you know, the ad convert because the user's in the mindset of thinking about that thing. Like, we're very much in line with that general direction, which is really cool. How we've actually gone about that, of course, has improved and evolved, and even
Hmm.
the technology has evolved over the last, since we started. But yeah, the
Took on
vision is really
feedback. Yeah.
totally. The vision is like very much just to organize content and make it, easily searchable, monetizable in a privacy safe way. And I think we're very, very much in line with that direction.
It is interesting to me as a, you know, I have the just the real privilege of talking to founders like yourself and how often like something that they've built that is often so unique that there's a steep learning curve on the front end, you know, for clients to kind of onboard this mentally and aspirationally. But I would think that you've got a pretty easy learning curve, or easy may not be a good word, but pretty understandable maybe learning curve. But when you would explain what you're trying to achieve, I would think that they, you know, clients would get that pretty quickly.
One, yes, they do. And two, even when we just show them how it works, the aha moment goes, man, that's really cool.
Where you
When I
guys
think
been for 20 years? That's right.
exactly. And I think some of the big reasons are they're so used to this category targeting or keyword targeting or negative keyword targeting. We still have folks that are sending us a list of like, don't target these keywords, or
Hmm.
here's a block list of things. And while we'll still, have ways to kind of think about those or make considerations around the existing framework for how they've been using this type of targeting, once they see the power and just the increased conversion rate through a better CTR and more engagement, they kind of quickly go, oh, I didn't really need all these legacy ways of
Yeah.
thinking about how to use this tool. And like that's a really cool.
I man, I love it. And I told you before we hit record that, you know, you're going to, you know, say things that are certainly going to trigger, you know, follow-up questions, you know, and there's been so many even in this short time we've had a chance to chat. But I do want to touch on a couple more just quick questions before we, you know, jump into our rapid fire round here. But one is if there was a tagline for classified or classify. So what would be the very short tagline that you think kind of captures the ethos of what you're trying to build?
It really is, I think, aligned with our mission statement, which is to take content and organize it and make it, more monetizable in a privacy safe way.
And
Kind of like the
yeah,
library of the world, right? We want to be the library of the world's content.
but an accurate, authentic, you know, library that's not kind of building black backlinks that are that fail and the whole idea that you're not sending people on kind of a wild goose chase, you know,
Yeah.
in the marketing space. Is there you know, you mentioned earlier about marketing agencies, and a lot of our audience, you know, is kind of in that space. So speak directly to the benefits. If I'm running a marketing agency, what are some of the direct benefits that I can, you know, employ tomorrow, you know, using Classify?
Yeah. So, I mean, you all know that marketing is one really is complex. Two, you have existing clients and then you are constantly pitching for new clients. I think a couple of the things, and we'd love to chat with anybody who wants to chat, always. a couple of the things are one, building contextual segments or like these curated lists of URLs based on the context, is kind of our bread and butter. There are existing segments that live live off the shelf that you can grab today. And then also when we do custom ones, like that's where we really see the like dramatic increase in engagement. And then two, it's kind of cool. The new tool that we launched on the website, I've also heard a lot of feedback from media planners and buyers, and that based on that initial prompt, we're kind of extrapolating out who the audience is. So they're using
Mm.
some of what we're building in addition to the contextual segment. They're using our audience descriptor in their media campaign and when they're doing a pitch. So like there's some other cool
Mm.
use cases that folks are finding with the tool as it exists today, which is still fairly basic. Like I think we've got a lot to do in a lot of the roadmap and a lot we'll be releasing over the next couple months. But even what you can just find live today has been impactful for folks.
Where do you see Classify in, say, 18 months, 12 to 18 months? What's kind of the hockey stick projection you're looking at?
There's a lot to do just in the open web space, but I think we're all deeply aware that like user interaction with the internet is changing dramatically,
Hmm.
and people are spending less time. It doesn't mean that like it's necessarily decreasing, but it's definitely slowing down. And people are spending more and more time, less time going to Google and doing traditional, blue link click search,
Yep.
and a lot more time leveraging, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude
Hmm.
to do more and more and more for them. So when I think about us in 18 months, I think that we will have been even more helpful at a broader scale for folks, that are running advertising against all kinds of different, whether it's just a web page or whether it's video or audio, helping to provide a lot more insight into where their ad should show up.
Mm.
And hopefully we have more of that, you know, more pieces to the puzzle along that solution of how do we make sure that the right ad, not just the ad that they originally started with, but maybe it's something that looks more like what they're running.
Right.
But also, hopefully we're able to help inform some of the new behaviors around the internet, and hopefully we're able to be well positioned, to kind of work with some of these larger companies that are providing the right tools
Hmm.
for how people engage with the internet today. So in addition to just organizing it, one piece to the puzzle, but I'd like to think that we'll also be in a position of helping to inform, where those advertisers show up across a whole myriad of different services.
And I would think even from a customer base or customer standpoint perspective that, man, if I'm getting ads targeted to me and things that I really want to look for, and you're making it easy for me to find them, I think that's a double bonus. I don't feel I'm being spammed. I feel I'm being, informed, and what a great way to, for the customer journey that, that I'm actually finding what I'm looking for, type thing, because I'm interested in what you're talking about. So it is it's gonna be really interesting to see the journey and with ChatGPT 8, in 18 months or whatever number we're going to be on it. It'll be interesting to see how you've kind of iterated as well to kind of keep up with the changes in AI. But man, I could continue to ask you questions all afternoon, but I want to honor your time as well. But I really appreciate you taking that time today. But I do want to kind of pop into the rapid fire,
Yeah.
questions here. And hey, just really quick answers. First thing that comes to mind. Nothing, long detailed, but did you get along with your parents growing up?
Yeah, very much.
Do you have siblings?
I do. One sister,
Any pets currently?
no pets,
Children?
no children.
On a typical work day, what time do you get up in the morning?
Between 6 to 6:30.
And what time do you normally go to bed?
Yeah, I mean, I try to go to bed before 11, but sometimes it's later.
Sometimes you're just in the middle of something, you just can't stop. Ideal vacation spot anywhere on the planet, money not an object.
Ooh, mountains. I'm such a mountains
I
person.
am a huge mountains guy.
Yeah, I want to go like backcountry ski touring off of a sailboat is my next like when I have time, that's the next destination.
Love it. How does faith affect the way you do business?
From a religious standpoint or from just a general, like,
This is your question to answer. You answer it however you want to answer.
You have to have, well, I'll try to make this one concise because you asked for rapid fire, but I think you have to have faith in yourself, in the ability to be curious and thoughtful and iterate. You have to have faith in your team. You have to have faith in your clients and your partners. And it's kind of operating through an acceptable risk tolerancy and knowing that we're all human, nobody's perfect, and everybody has their own incentives and initiatives going on. But I mean, faith, there's a lot of faith in business. You have to have faith.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Okay, closing question. One thing, if you were king for a day in the marketing space, what is one thing that you would change about the marketing industry as a whole?
Oh gosh. Before I even provided that answer, I mean, I would probably take, up until the last minute of having to make that decision, I would spend the rest of the day listening to as many people as possible about what they thought the right changes to make would be, and then maybe give myself another couple minutes to think about it before I answer that question. But I don't know. I mean, probably in the general direction of like simplification, in terms of simplifying the whole ecosystem. It's so fragmented and there's so much waste and inefficiency, and it's not sustainable.
I think you've missed your calling. You should go into politics, brother.
I was a poli-sci major back in college.
I listen first, and then we take on information, then we make a decision. I love it. I love it, man. Is there anything that we have not touched on that you think would be just a great way to kind of wrap this up and give people maybe a better idea of Classify as a whole?
I appreciate you asking that question. There's so many cool new tools out, and the industry had been, I think ad tech had gone through one when it originally launched with, the DoubleClicks and the App Nexuses of the world. When they'd originally launched, there was so much excitement and enthusiasm about new ways to buy ads programmatically, and all these cool exchanges that, popped up. And then it's kind of gone through this lull. And right now, based on modern machine learning and AI, like there's so much innovation happening right now. So I guess the general encouragement, and there's a lot of cool competitors that are, doing similar stuff or trying to do similar stuff to what we're doing. And I think it's cool to go check out and explore and like see what other folks are doing. So encouragement would be try new tools, when new vendors that pop up and you learn about new technologies, listen and test things out and see what works for you, because not every product works for every client, for every application, but the more you understand about the whole industry, the better you're able to find the right strategy that includes the right tooling for your specific application.
Brendan, I love it. I mean, I just really appreciate your thoughtfulness. And, when I'd ask you questions, you just don't pop off canned answers to me. You're really trying to think, okay, what's the best way to answer this question, and and really answer the question, not giving the political side. Well, let me answer that by asking you this or saying this. So, throwing me off the scent, so to speak. But just thank you again for just taking time today, just to share your story, share the kind of the genesis of Classify, and really just helping our audience, helping marketing agencies grow and scale their business. Man, just hope the best for Classify and for you. And just thank you again for taking time today. Have a great day, Brendan.
Awesome, Kevin. Thank you. You too.
Thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. To learn more, go to umbrellaus.com.